Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Saniyah, and I am delighted to host this fireside chat as we explore the themes of resilience and authenticity in leadership, especially during a time when climate action, gender equity, and DEI are facing unprecedented pushback. Today, we're joined by Supriya Verma. Supriya is an award-winning corporate executive, global sustainability leader, speaker, author, and social entrepreneur dedicated to reimagining leadership for a more just and sustainable world. She also serves as the Chief Sustainability Officer at Bellner Engineering Inc., a leading Canadian firm advancing sustainable building technologies and innovation. As the founder of the Sustainability X magazine, she has built an influential global platform that amplifies women's voices and advances courageous, inclusive leadership across sectors and generations. In 2019, she was recognized as one of Canada's top 30 under 30 in sustainability leadership by Corporate Knights and awarded McMaster's University's prestigious Alumni Arch Award in 2021 for unique and significant contributions to society. These are only a few of Supriya's impressive accolades. Supriya is the author of Bold Women, Sustainable Futures, a powerful and deeply personal book that highlights the experiences of women leading across climate science, business, governments, justice, and the arts. Through their stories and her own, this book asks a timely question. How do we continue to lead with courage, clarity, and conviction when the world seems to be moving backward? Our conversation today will focus on exactly that, what it means to stay resilient in the face of resistance, and how to lead authentically within systems that weren't built with all of us in mind. We'll spend the first part of our time in guided conversation, and then we'll open the floor to your questions, including those many of you submitted during registration. Before we wrap up, we will also select a random 10 event registrants to receive a free copy of Supriya's new book, Bold Women, Sustainable Futures, Leadership Lessons in an Age of Resistance. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Supriya Verma.
Hi, Sonia. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you to McMaster and DeGroote, Faculty of Science, and the Alumni Association for organizing this whole event today. It's always a pleasure to be back, and I look forward to today's conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, to start off, your book explores the emotional and professional toll of leading during moments of climate pushback and gendered resistance. I'm curious, from your perspective, what does resilience look like for women leaders today, and how can they maintain momentum without burning out?
So great question. So to answer your question, in the book, I started writing this in 2024, and I took a hard look at the global backlash against DEI and ESG because I wanted to name what so many women were feeling across industries and across age groups, and especially those in senior roles. So the pushback is real, and it's not always loud though, and it's usually quiet, and it's a coordinated retreat, if you will, that happens through reorganizations, budget shifts, language changes, and the slow disappearance of commitments that were once celebrated publicly. And I know of DEI departments disappearing overnight in the corporate world, and sadly now also in academia, entire sustainability departments are being wiped out. I just had a conversation 2 weeks ago with someone at Conestoga College, and her entire department is gone overnight. So it's sad to see that it's flowing or trickling from the corporate world into academia as well. So the pushback is definitely real, and this is something I came up with in 2024, but to see this happening in 2026 at such a larger scale is so much more concerning. But before going further, I just wanted to quickly highlight the book structure briefly, so you have an idea what I'm talking about. So the first half of the book features 9 women in sustainability. They're all trailblazers in their own rights. They've all paved their ways in different industries alone back in the day. And the ninth chapter, or the ninth woman featured, is myself. So I talk about my own journey as a woman of color in sustainability. The middle has a Fury Fulcrum chapter called The Turning Point, and that features 16 more women from around the world answering the question, how do we move forward when the world is moving backwards? So I have a lot of former news anchor on Global News. she also has her voice in this book. So it's amazing to see resistance, and they still continue to lead and answering that question, how to move forward in the world that's moving backwards. And then the second half of the book is actually comprised of several other chapters about what steps to take moving forward. So healing as a leadership strategy, the role of community and networks, and how they can critically help women advance forward, practical pathways for everyone from allies to educators to students to entrepreneurs and so on, especially for male allies. Also, a note on male allies. I'm also working on my second book already based off of this one, also on male allyship and co-leading in an age of resistance. But back to this one first. So some other chapters in this book of why representation alone is not enough. So kind of redistributing power in a dignified way. It's not enough to say, oh, you have a board of directors and 10 men, 1 woman. Wow, that's not how it works. You need to redistribute power in a more dignified way, in my opinion, to get any change and see any productive results in the real world. And last but not least, how to embrace authenticity, healing, and empathy as leadership tools and strengths instead of viewing them as weaknesses, which is not, in my opinion. So given the level of social and environmental injustice I witnessed over the last 10 years from when I first started Sustainability X in 2016, 10 years ago. So this year is our 10th anniversary. And I'd come up with the idea of the book in 2024, and the book initially was just going to profile the 9 women. And I was totally going to avoid the whole conversation on ESG and DEI just because of how politically charged everything is and how there's so much enthusiasm these days politically. But over the summer of 2025, I had a conversation with a publisher, and they said, if not now, then when? And that struck me. And that's when I decided to talk about the ESG and DEI backlash. And me being someone who likes taking risks and talking about the things that no one likes to talk about, I decided to go for it. And I decided to redo the entire second half of the book. I literally locked myself away in a cave for 2 months last year. And I excuse me, I finished the last half of the book over the summer, and I pushed the launch event to March 2026 now. I'm sorry, excuse me, I've been talking so much for the last few days. But it was originally supposed to be published in November 2025. So because I had to redo everything, I pushed the event, the launch to March 2026, which was perfect because it's Women's Month. And I think universe always has good plans for you in store. So it's great to go with the flow sometimes. So now that
Yeah.
you have an idea what the book is about, one of the most painful parts is that women specifically are often asked to absorb the retreat and the backlash without naming it. We're asked to be pragmatic. We're asked to soften our message. We're asked to keep things calm. But leadership, in my opinion, especially in this age of resistance, is not about staying calm while our values are being diluted, if you will. It's about staying aligned and anchored within ourselves while the environment around us becomes wild and volatile. And for example, I like looking at this kind of thinking of yourself as being the lighthouse. So you keep standing tall and keep shining bright despite what's going on around you. The weather keeps changing, but you have to keep pushing forward and shining bright. Um, but back to the question, my answer is that resilience today is not just about being strong, it's about staying in the work without letting the work consume you. A lot of women that I've talked to recently are taught that resilience is endurance. So like, again, push through, prove yourself, outwork the room, and embody masculine leadership traits to be accepted. But the women in this book specifically model something so much more sustainable, in my opinion. And they treat resilience as a form of strategy and boundaries and community. So 3 things specifically that I saw repeatedly that was common between all these women is that they practice selective courage, number 1. They don't fight every battle, they fight the ones that matter. And that's how you keep momentum across decades and sustain yourself over such a long period of time and not just months. And second, they build systems, not just effort. And for example, leaders in governance and institutions, they don't survive on passion alone. They also build processes and partnerships, support systems and structures that carry the work forward even when they're tired on some days. And number 3, they treat rest as a leadership discipline. And I think this is not talked about enough, but we should. And burnout isn't just personal. It's a systemic outcome when institutions rely on women's emotional labor to hold everything together. And recently, also, I've seen a lot of women in sustainability and social impact voluntarily leaving their roles and their careers because of the burnout. And there's just so much gaslighting and there's so much convincing and nothing's getting done and they get frustrated and then they just leave. So my practical answer is resilience is protecting your life force, basically, and then using it with precision because you can't really operate from a state of lack and try to fight for a sustainable world while you're fighting for wholeness and sustainability yourself. You have to take care of yourself first, because the backlash era is designed to exhaust you into silence, which is what I usually say. But in my opinion, it's time to change that.
Thank you so much for sharing those perspectives. Yeah, I think especially in terms of burnout, it's so, so important in this day and age to take care of yourselves.
Mhm.
So now you mentioned these women in your book. Across the women you profile, you highlight shared strategies for overcoming obstacles. Now, what common resilience practices stood out to you, and how might leaders and allies adopt them?
So what surprised me a lot was actually how consistent the patterns were across all the women featured from all these totally different fields, from like climate to social justice to different industries. And it was amazing how there was so much in common despite things being so different at the same time. So here are the shared practices that I found, actually about 4 to 5. The first one, they don't lead alone, which is something I noticed. They build coalitions across sectors, generations, and disciplines. And that's actually a big theme of the book. So connection is a form of power. Second, they combine legitimacy with disruption. So they learn the system's language, so science, policy, finance, governance, and then they use it to change what the system rewards and within whatever power they have. And number three, they keep coming back to first principles. So, for example, when politics gets noisy, in the book, we have Senator Rosa Galvez, we have Toronto City Councilor Diane Sachs. They've all had their important roles in politics currently. And they choose to return to their values repeatedly. So like human dignity, intergenerational responsibility, evidence, and justice. And fourth, they create visibility pathways for others. So for example, I've also featured Deborah Rosati. She is the founder of Women Get On Board. It's a huge network across Canada that empowers women into boardrooms. So her work through the Women's Board Pipelines is a perfect example. And she doesn't just talk about representation, she builds the mechanisms for it by building networks. And for allies, most importantly, I think what allies need to understand is that you can't just say that you care. I've said this so many times. You can't just say that you care. You have to show that you care, and you have to be an active ally and not a passive ally. So don't just praise women's leadership. Do something about it, protect it, fund it, promote it, credit it, talk about it, and amplify women's voices. Because admiration without structural support just becomes another form of extraction and just another facade, if you will.
Yeah, I think that active allyship for sure is so, so important, especially in this day and age. And so another theme that really runs throughout this book is authenticity in leadership. So what does it mean to lead authentically within systems not built for you? And how can emerging leaders stay true to their values even when authenticity feels risky?
So a really big theme in this book was authenticity and resilience and embracing those things as your strengths, again, not your weaknesses. So authenticity, I would say, isn't just say everything you think. It's actually refusing to abandon yourself and your values in order to belong. It's about choosing yourself and keeping your wholeness within intact by not having to lead and live as two separate people personally and professionally and try to be someone you're not, which is a huge source of exhaustion, again, and mental stress and burnout for a lot of leaders in social impact and sustainability in particular. You want to be aligned with your values as much as possible to embody true, authentic leadership and to choose presence over performance and progress over perfection. So, in my opinion, in systems not built for you, there's often a pressure to perform a version of leadership that feels acceptable, but not necessarily acceptable to you, but acceptable to the people around you. And that's where the issue is. So they usually expect you to soften your voice, but still be decisive, be confident, but not too much, be warm, but not emotional, be visionary, but not idealistic. But the women, however, in this book show that authenticity is actually a practice and actually a way of life, which I also actually identify with. So it's about clarifying your values, choosing your boundaries, which is big, being strategic with your truth, and building a community that reinforces who you are. So for all leaders listening in today, whether you're a senior executive or an emerging leader or a student looking for female role models while trying to navigate their way through this age of resistance, I'd say start with micro authenticity or small consistent acts of alignment. So you kind of get used to it over time because the earlier you speak up and the more authentic you are earlier on in your career, the better it is for you. So for example, naming what matters in a meeting. Does this have equity implications? If it does, say so. Asking the question others avoid, who benefits benefits from this decision and who doesn't? Do the costs outweigh the benefits, or is it the other way around? And don't shrink back from making your voice heard. That is a really big one that I would advise. And choosing clarity over likability where possible. And knowing that your authenticity, your healing and empathy, most importantly, are valuable leadership tools that allow you to make more wiser and inclusive choices that help create the sustainable world that we need right now, one decision at a time. So yes, to answer your question, authenticity can be risky, but that's why the book doesn't romanticize it, but it does frame authenticity as something as you build alongside safety, support, and strategy, one step at a time, instead of trying to kind of burn down the whole place at once. You know, you take it one step at a time.
Sure, I think those baby steps are so, so important. Now, you write about a turning point in global attitudes towards climate action, DEI, and equity. How does resilience and authenticity help leaders navigate this moment with courage?
Yeah, great question. So resilience and authenticity, in my opinion, are what keeps leaders steady at a turning point. And for me, a turning point is like when the external world gets louder, more polarized, and more resistant to change. So resilience is what helps you stay in the work without being pulled into exhaustion, cynicism, or constant reaction, like I was saying earlier. It's the ability to keep your nervous system regulated, literally, and keep your strategy intact at the same time, and keep moving forward, even when the progress is not rewarded in the short term. You have to remember that there are long-term implications, and you have to use that as a motivational factor for you to keep going. So in the book, again, you see leaders like Diane Sachs, again, and Senator Rosa Galvez, women who stay consistent over the years, although it's really hard being a trailblazer during their time. And Diane Sachs specifically said to me that there were not a lot of role models back then. We're actually lucky to have these role models, but back then there were not many role models for women to look up to, because and as a result of that, they've built that stamina and boundaries and a long-term game mindset. So authenticity is what prevents resilience from becoming pure endurance, in my opinion. And it means you don't abandon your values just to be accepted by the system. And this can apply to your personal life as well. And at a turning point, institutions often pressure leaders to tone it down, to avoid naming equity, or to treat climate and DEI as optional and not mandatory, or having no meaning at all. So authentic leadership to me says that I can be strategic with my language, but I will not be strategic with my integrity, if you will. And again, going back to Diane Sachs, her chapter was a very interesting. She is an environmental lawyer, and throughout her journey, her room has been bugged. She's been spied upon, and a lot of interesting things have happened to her. So if you buy the book, be sure to read her chapter. I had a great time writing it. And another example from Diane Sachs's chapter, she was recruited by the Liberal Party of Ontario to lead, but they didn't want her to open her mouth because, if you know, she was the environmental commissioner of Ontario during her time with Doug Ford, and she was removed by him. And so she had a lot of information that she could have spoken about. But when it came to Doug Ford, the Liberal Party didn't want her to talk about it. So she said no, because that didn't align with her values. She's not someone that mutes her voice just to be accepted. So she went on to co-lead the Green Party of Ontario after that instead for several years, until she recently became a Toronto City Councillor before running as candidate for the mayor of Toronto as well. So that's just an example of how these women have embodied the strategy, if you will, a long-term game mindset of aligning with your values and sticking to it and leading that way as well. So together, resilience and authenticity create courage that is sustainable, because resilience keeps you stable and authenticity keeps you aligned, in my opinion. And alignment is what makes your courage credible, because people can feel when you're leading from conviction and presence over performance, and they're more likely to identify with that. So that's what this moment requires, in my opinion. Leaders who can stay grounded in truth, speak with clarity, build coalitions, and keep going, especially when the world asks us to move backwards.
Wow, yeah, no, that story is so inspiring, and I can't wait to read that chapter. And that actually leads nicely into the story behind the book itself. So, what inspired you to write this book now, during a period of mounting resistance to climate change, gender equity, and DEI?
So this is my favorite question. I've been answering this like over and over again for the last few weeks, actually. So I wrote this book because I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. Sonia, for me, the spark was not just a single dramatic moment. It was more of a slow burn. And I say that because in the prelude, especially in the book, if you read it, because I want women to recognize themselves in it. I just have my paperback if you're going to see what the book looks like. Not sure if you can see it. It's in my Zoom background as well. Here is the hardcover as well. Again, I don't know if you can see it. There it is. Um, but yes, it was years of watching how often women are told directly or indirectly to wait. So wait until you're more senior, wait until the timing is right, wait until you're more polished, wait until you've proven it again and again. And at some point, the waiting game begins to feel like a strategy that actually keeps the room comfortable, not a strategy that protects the future. So my turning point was actually realizing that I could not keep outsourcing my authority to a system that wasn't built to hand it back to me, especially in a dignified manner. And I could feel this growing urgency as the world became louder, harsher, and more polarized. And as we entered what I call in the book an age of resistance, where progress is no longer just difficult, it's actually actively contested, which is quite disturbing. With years of progress being undone in seconds, literally, like decades of progress being undone in seconds, and that hurts so much. Through ESG and DEI backlash and misogyny being normalized around the world again, like I said. So I kept coming back to one line. That became a compass for me. And the line that I wrote in the book was, "The future is not waiting, it's ours to shape now." Like right now. Do not delay this even by a day. We have to start looking at these issues now. Because the decisions that shape our lives are already being made right now in boardrooms, in budgets, in policy, in governance priorities, and what companies choose to measure, and especially what companies choose to ignore. That's a big one. So waiting for permission in that context isn't humility, in my opinion, it's delay, and delay has consequences, and those consequences are usually negative. So I saw this urgency mirrored in all the women that I profiled. So in this age of resistance, we need to ensure that the future is shaped by leaders who can actually hold complexity, justice, and long-term resilience all together at the same time. And that is why I could no longer wait. So the timing was the point that, this book is for now when leadership is being tested.
Oh, yeah. No, as a young leader, I mean, that line is so inspiring. And I think just everyone listening is probably going to start taking action tonight. So, and in the book, you also weave in your own experiences alongside the stories of other leaders. You share your personal journey as a woman of color, navigating visibility and leadership. So, how has your identity shaped your approach to advocacy, courage, and influence?
So for me, identity has actually shaped my leadership in huge ways. First, it's shaped my relationship with visibility. So when you're a woman of color, visibility isn't neutral. You learn early that being seen can bring opportunity, but also scrutiny, and you're judged for it a lot. And you can be exceptional and still be questioned. You can be calm and still be read as too much. That creates what I describe in the book as a kind of visibility math, if you will, where women are forced to constantly calculate how do I show up fully without becoming a target? And how do I do what I want without being judged? How do I carry myself in this world and society and align with these silly norms that don't even align with my values myself? How do I kind of break through that? It's silly. And so I kind of had to unlearn that silence and unlearn all those lessons at the same time while navigating my way through this age of resistance. So it's my identity has actually influenced my leadership ideology quite a bit. And second, it also shaped my approach to influence. So I learned that influence isn't always given through title. Sometimes it's built through platforms, networks, and systems. So for me and wherever I am today, it is because of the power of community and networks and people that actually uplift you. So again, active allies and not passive allies, and then giving that back by being an active ally yourself as well. So that's it's also part of why I built the Sustainability X magazine and the Global 50 Sustainability Awards, which is now in its fifth year. And this is where we profile 50 women from around the world in sustainability, again, across age and gender and geography. So there is more information on the website if you want to nominate someone this year for our 10th anniversary. But back to the question, I wanted to create an ecosystem actually of where women's leadership is centered and mainstream and normalized. And it's not a big deal if a woman happens to make her way up to a leadership position. These things should be normalized. And a lot of women in the book were the firsts in their respective fields. Like Shauna Pandya, for example, if you know her, she is a physician and an astronaut candidate, and she is actually Canada's first female commercial astronaut, and she'll be flying with Virgin Galactic this year in 2026. So just an example of like how women of color are advancing everywhere, despite what they might face in their industries. And in her whole chapter in the book, she also talked about what it was like to keep moving forward in the world that's moving backwards. So again, that's another chapter that I think a lot of people would be interested in. for especially women of color. So I think about specifically me being a woman of color as well. It's also kind of sharpened my commitment to justice-based sustainability, especially since my nani or my mom's mom, so my grandma, she was a survivor of the partition between India and Pakistan in 1947. And I've written about this a lot, okay, in my chapter because it's affected me so much. My own chapter, my journey as a woman of color and sustainability, that's literally the title of my chapter in the book. And I've written about the horrors of the partition in the book and how that whole journey and how that whole story has affected me and my ideology and how that informed my leadership. And my mother herself was a police officer and she rescued a lot of girls from, human trafficking and all that. So a lot of horror stories. I've heard a lot of that growing up. So sustainability for me actually is interdisciplinary, and I see it as the intersection of environment, economy, society, justice, and power. So it's not just about the climate. It's not just about um, the environment like people treat it. It's also about social justice. And because the world's greatest challenges, I believe, can't be solved ever in silos alone, you have to collaborate. That's why I've always said for over a decade that sustainability is all about teamwork. And that means cross-sector and industry collaboration with people from diverse backgrounds and cultures. And that includes both women and women of color as well. And so to just top it off, so for me, courage is a renewable resource and it's about continuity. And that means showing up again and again with clarity, standards, and mission until the system has to eventually be forced to adjust in our favor.
Wow, yeah, I think the stories are so, so important. So, looking ahead, how can we ensure that this next generation of sustainability leaders, especially young women, are empowered to step into their power despite black backlash and regression?
Yeah, so for this question, it's interesting because I think we have to stop asking young women to be brave in isolation. The next generation doesn't just need inspiration, they need infrastructure, which I've been saying a lot these days. And they also need to see themselves represented. So, like in the chapter, when I talk about representation specifically, there's a whole chapter in the book about that, why representation alone is not enough. Yes, it matters, but there has to be an equal and fair distribution of power in a respectful manner and with dignity. So if you don't feel seen, then some women may not even pursue careers in a particular field, and their careers will stop literally before they even got started because they didn't see themselves seen or represented. So three things, in my opinion, that matter the most. First, visible role models with real stories matter a lot. I think young women need to know what resistance looks like in practice, which is something I've also tried to highlight in this book through profiling all these amazing women. And that it doesn't mean that you're failing, it means that you're doing something consequential. And second, I think mentorship plus sponsorship. So mentorship is guidance, but sponsorship is access. And this is something that Deborah Rosati in the book talks about as well in her chapter. And the book shows how networks and governance pathways change outcomes and not just confidence. So in my opinion, if you look at roads and bridges, they carry trucks and vehicles forward. But when it comes to networks, those networks carry ideas and influence and power forward. So it really depends how you look at it, but we also need sponsorship in addition to mentorship. And the third, I think we have to kind of embody skill and courage together. Again, like I said, courage is a renewable resource because backlash kind of thrives when people are underprepared. So we teach the hard skills like governance, finance, policy, literacy, negotiation, media strategy, and all that stuff, alongside values and including how to embrace your authenticity and your resilience within yourself as a leadership tool and a strength. So my message to young women is you don't need to wait for permission to lead. You are ready already. Like I said earlier, a lot of people and places and things in society and experiences you go through will kind of force you to think that you're not ready. But the reality is that you are, and you always have been ready, and your worth is inherent and your worth is unconditional, literally. Because you are worthy because you exist. And this is something that I've come to learn after a very long time by unlearning all these lessons and the projections of other people onto me. And no, it has nothing to do with anyone. I am worthy and I will continue to lead. And I know that I'm ready to lead now. And that's the message that I want to get across to younger women, that you are ready and you don't have to listen to what people think about you. You don't have to think that, oh, I don't have this degree. Maybe I am not good enough. No, you're ready. Just get started. So you do need people who will stand beside you at the same time, but that's what community is all about. So again, you are ready, and also try to stick around with your own community who that kind of pushes you forward at the same time. And again, we're talking about active allyship and not just passive allyship. So find those active allies in your life and move forward now. Don't wait.
Thank you so much, Supriya, for those incredible reflections. So we received several great questions from participants during registration. So I'll start by bringing some of those into this conversation as well. And as we move through them, please feel free to share any live questions in the chat as well to anyone listening. So one question that came up from the audience relates to navigating values in leadership. How can leaders recognize the line between strategic compromise and compromising their values?
Sure. So I just wanted to know, I heard there were a lot of questions that were submitted, and I'm so happy to have that. And we need to be having more of these conversations more often, actually. So I'll be giving more short and sweet answers to these questions, not as long as the previous questions during this webinar. So to answer the specific question, so I think a good test is, does this compromise change the outcome or does it change who I have to become? So what is being compromised here? So strategic compromise adjusts the tactics to keep moving, but values compromise asks you to stay silent about harm, equity, or truth. So in the book, women actually model this by staying flexible on process, but non-negotiable on principle. So you have to kind of weigh what is being sacrificed, what is being compromised, and kind of do a cost-benefit analysis and take your decision accordingly.
Oh, yeah. I think that's such a good point, something I haven't ever considered. So, another audience member asked about leadership and privilege. So, if someone already holds significant privilege and is in a leadership position, how can they hold the door open for others coming behind them?
This is a question I'm getting a lot actually these days, since I've been promoting this book, All Women's Month so far. And there are a lot of people across in different levels of their careers asking the same question. So I'm happy to see that people are actually paying attention to this. So again, I would say moving from mentorship to sponsorship, again, like I just said, being an active ally, not a passive ally, and recommend names for roles, share their credit publicly, open rooms, and not just to give advice, but also push for transparent criteria, if you will. So decisions aren't just based on business as usual, try to do something different and try to do the right thing for a change. This is a big leadership theme again in the book with a chapter of its own about how networks and community are the real infrastructure. And you can empower others through these networks, through the power that you hold. And again, be an active ally, not a passive ally, and show that you care. Don't just say it.
I think networking is so important, and I've met so many incredible people that, people that connected me to you, and these conversations are so important. So we also received a question specifically about the experiences of women in color in leadership spaces. So how can women of color demonstrate resilience in the workplace and within their industries, particularly in environments where additional barriers may exist?
Mhm. So I like this question because for me, resilience is all about building boundaries and allies and a strategic support system again, so you don't carry everything alone. So document your impact, protect your energy, that's very important. Find communities again where you don't have to translate yourself, but you're understood for who you are. And my own story in the book speaks to navigating visibility by staying fully yourself without letting the room define you. I strive to be like a lighthouse again, keep standing tall and shining bright and aligned with your values and live with your purpose despite the changing weather and systems and politics and circumstances and people around you.
I think that lighthouse part is so important. It's going to be my new lock screen, a good thing to wake up to. So another question from the audience is about entering the workforce. So what advice would you give to young women who are entering fields like engineering today?
So that's a big one. Me personally, I had some strange experiences that are written about in the book, also in my chapter about navigating the engineering space. To keep it short and sweet, treat your early years like a credibility build, if you will. So yes, of course, learn the technical fundamentals deeply, and then learn how decisions actually get made. And you have to kind of draw that connection between the two when it comes to the real world. And the university does teach you the technical, but when you enter the real world, you have to learn to make these connections on your own. So learn things like, budgets and risks, stakeholders, and like everything involved when it comes to decision making, especially in the corporate world. So find one sponsor and one kind of peer crew, if you will, and practice speaking up early, like I said earlier. And you need to remember that you don't need to know everything to belong, and you are ready, like I said, but you also have to keep learning and stay visible and relevant at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I know you also talk a lot about burnout in your book, and you've spoken about it. So a few questions touched on burnout and sustainability in leadership. So what are some ways leaders can recognize and avoid burnout while continuing to lead effectively?
So this is a really big theme again in the book and what's going on in this age of resistance, literally as you speak. So burnout often comes from over responsibility, in my opinion, and kind of like the mental and emotional stress of performing leadership, not leading authentically, as you were having to perform that. And that doesn't align with our values or our true selves, rather than leading authentically and being gaslighted again, or not being taken seriously, or having to repeatedly convince people to make the right choices and so on. So again, as we speak, I've met so many women lately in sustainability, climate, and social impact who are voluntarily leaving their roles because of this specific burnout. So I would say protect, one non-negotiable recovery practice for yourself to sustain yourselves as well. Like I said earlier, in the book, all these women have had something to do for themselves, like at least take 10 minutes out a day to kind of realign and come back to yourself, like, read a book, take a walk, or do something that realigns you with yourself, because there is a lot of burnout. And I've experienced that personally as well. And things like sleep, movement, prioritizing your health, quiet time for yourself, taking time to realign with your values and do something creative. Creativity is really big for me. It keeps me anchored when the world around me kind of gets wild sometimes. So do something creative that reminds you of who you are, and you remember your true authentic self. So and most importantly, you can also set realistic boundaries. That's also a big one for me personally. And stop treating exhaustion as a proof of commitment or credibility or worthiness or trying to prove your value to anyone. And in the book, again, a recurring lesson is that rest is a leadership discipline, not a reward.
Yeah, I think finding those creative outlets is so, so important,
Hmm.
especially when you're in leadership spaces and constantly expected to do so much.
Hmm.
So another audience member asked about navigating the current political climate. So how can leaders balance operating in a heavily politicized context while facing pressure from organizations to remain apolitical?
So I think this is a really good question when it comes to the entire backlash in the first place, right? And we see all these rollbacks and DEI and ESG rollbacks in policies and all the backlash. So I would say, in my opinion, and after everything that I've observed and talking to all these amazing women and just studying the industry overall for years, as leaders, I think we balance the politicized context by refusing to confuse apolitical with value neutral. So we have to find that balance between the politics and our values. And most organizations, again, remember, I've minored in business at DeGroote, and at DeGroote at McMaster, there was this whole thing about values fit, you know, the employee fitting in with the values of the company, if you will. So most organizations already have these values. So for example, safety, integrity, fairness, stewardship. And our job is to connect those hard conversations back to those values. So we name the work in terms of their mission, evidence, and the risk related to climate, health, safety, equity, and resilience, and so on. And we have to understand that those are operational realities. They're not going anywhere. But when we anchor decisions in data and lived impacts and business continuity, and what happens to people, supply chains, trust and compliance, and long-term performance as a result of that, and what happens if we ignore that, and what happens if we don't ignore that. So we kind of have to compare those two scenarios while linking our values back to our mission, despite what's going on around you. Again, kind of like if a company can also be like a lighthouse and keep shining bright and keep standing still, aligned with their own values instead of trying to buckle under the political pressure around them. You can always go back to the company's original mission statement, like why does your company exist in the first place? Remember your mission, remember the purpose. So you don't have to be loud and to be kind of make huge announcements, but you can be unwavering in your daily small practices when you work. And you can say that, this isn't partisan, but it's responsible leadership. And you can kind of stand up for your values that way in a company and keep moving the conversation towards more effective and inclusive solutions, if you will.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about personal leadership, and one question touched on that side of leadership. So can you speak about the relationship between healthy family dynamics and leadership success?
Yeah, so this is a really big one. And another theme that I'm seeing recently is the connection between your personal life and your professional life. Initially, a lot of people thought that your personal life has nothing to do with your professional leadership style, but it actually does. So in my opinion, and again, what I've seen over the years, healthy relationships usually create emotional safety, which supports your confidence and focus and resilience. But unfortunately, not everyone has that foundation. So any relationship, personal, professional, platonic, whatever, should never take away from your wholeness or needing you to sacrifice yourself or constantly abandon yourself to make things work. That is misalignment. That is not fair to you, and it's not good for your growth either. Um, personal or professional. So if you don't have that support, you should honor yourself by choosing yourself, is what I always say. And that is huge in leadership. If you choose yourself personally and professionally, you can be such a good, authentic leader, if you will. But leadership success can also come from your own chosen family. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but what family you're born into for some people, but you can choose your family moving forwards and the people that you connect with moving forward. So mentors, friends, communities, networks, again, like I said, find those active allies in your life and supportive networks that can help push you forward. And I think the key is having at least one place where you can be human and not in this constant performance mode where you have to keep being someone you're not.
I think the concept of found family is so, so important. And
Mhm.
kind of just piggybacking off that last question, someone asked, what advice would you give to someone whose loved ones don't believe that additional barriers exist for women in leadership?
Okay, so this question, this actually makes me mad because there are so many barriers, and how can you just say that, nothing's wrong? There are a lot of issues. But the thing is, Sonia, we all go through different experiences in our lives, and we grow up in different cultures that all affect our belief systems and ideologies and the way we perceive things in so many different ways. But you can start with stories and specifics and not necessarily debating over them, but maybe sharing a concrete example and one impact that it created, like missed opportunities, double standards, safety issues, and attacks on credibility. And then ask curious questions through genuine curiosity, like why do you believe this? What makes you believe that? And what would change your mind? And what would you like? Would you want your daughter to face this or your sister to face this? So I'm all about bridge building and dialogue personally, which is why I started Sustainability X in the first place. And then I ended up writing this book. But if they still dismiss it, then protect your peace and stand by your values. Because validation, again, isn't always available externally. And that's where internal validation and healing plays a huge role in your own personal leadership journey. But you can choose to keep living and leading aligned with your own values and let people learn their own way. And often they learn the hard way. So you can keep moving forwards with your own values.
Sure. Thank you so much for that perspective. I think being open, but also knowing that sometimes like there's only so much you can do is a really important mindset to have.
Mhm.
Now, I'm also seeing a couple of new questions coming in. So these are live audience questions. So I'll be bringing a couple in now. So someone asked, what is the most impactful, tangible action an active ally has taken to support you or your network?
I would actually express my gratitude right here to Dr. Deborah Rosati. She is the founder of Women Get On Board. And the active allyship, she has shown me what active allyship looks like by constantly supporting me. I first met her in 2022, and we worked together on the awards for the Sustainability X magazine. She was selected for inaugural awards. And since then, she's been so supportive of the work that we do at Sustainability X. And when it comes to the awards, she nominates other women and she nominates me everywhere, and she recommends my name everywhere that I go. I mean, she is just such an amazing person. Like, she actually stands by what she says. So if you want to learn about active allyship, again, you can learn that from Deborah Rosati and the work she does at WGOB. So for me, and especially for this book yesterday, we had a huge book event with Women Get On Board with Deborah Rosati. And the outcome was just amazing. The response was so overwhelmingly positive. And it just goes to show how far active allyship can actually take women and create even more impact by taking more women forward and empowering these women. So again, I'm actually I'm happy I can express my gratitude here to her. And again, if you want to learn more about her, again, me being an active ally as well, you can learn more about her and her work in this book as well, specifically the chapter about networks and community.
This woman sounds incredible, and I'm so, so excited
Mm-hmm.
to read her chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So someone also asks, for those watching entire DEI or sustainability departments disappear, what is the
Mm-hmm.
best way to keep the momentum going at a grassroots level?
Okay, this is a big one because again, this was just 2 weeks ago when I heard what happened at Conestoga College, and I was very sad to hear that, to see that the corporate rollbacks are trickling into academia, and that's sad because I personally believe that education is where change starts, and if we're not educating our students, what are they going to do in the real world when they enter? How are they going to face these challenges? How are they going to solve any problems? And that was so disturbing to me. So I think the best way to move forward with this is specifically, if I give you the example of the woman I spoke to, she is now involved in a lot of nonprofit networks that are not academia related, but she tries to continue the mission of sustainability and social justice through nonprofit work that is not academia related at this time. So maybe that's the way, that's something you can do as well, to find these nonprofits to kind of accelerate the mission and keep the work going, but in a different context.
Yeah, no, for sure. And in moments like these, leaders are often forced to make difficult decisions about where to focus their energy. So someone asked, how do you tell the difference between a battle that matters and one that is just designed to exhaust you into silence?
So this is going to be different for everyone, and it's very context specific. It depends where you work, what industry you're in. But a battle that matters, in my opinion, is something that impacts a lot of people, and it's not just about your career personally, but it is also about the impact created through that battle you are fighting. So, for example, if I can go back to Diane Sachs, there were a lot of she had a lot of different opportunities to fight a lot of different legal cases, but she chose the ones that created the most impact. So if you're looking to kind of streamline what battles to fight and not to fight, you might want to look at within the power that you hold against, because this is so context specific and not everyone's a lawyer, right? But in Diane's context, she chose the cases that would create the most impact. So within, you have to decide within your current situation or role or the power you have right now, what can you do that can create the most social impact?
Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. And so in your book, you explore these questions through the experiences of many different women navigating leadership in those complex places. So from the woman you profiled, what resilient strategies surprised you the most or challenged your own assumptions about leadership?
I think what surprised me the most was, again, going back to all these women, um, it's just their audacity to keep leading despite what they're thrown, the things that people throw at women, literally, mentally, emotionally, politically even, and the audacity to just keep going. And again, if you look at the turning point chapter, how do we move forward in a world that's moving backwards? The synopsis of the chapter is basically you keep going despite what happens. You persist and you don't let go because you really don't have a choice. Yes, you have to sustain yourself, but you also have to keep going despite the backlash, especially then. That is when, I mean, not when the going is good, you keep going, but when the going is not going good, you have to keep going and keep fighting those fights and moving forward.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so this is going to be our last question for today. Another question that came in from the audience touches on the issue of representation in climate leadership. So this person pointed out something that comes up frequently in climate conversations, which is that women around the world are often among the communities most impacted by climate change,
Mm.
whether that's through economic vulnerability or social structures or environmental exposure. The effects are often felt very directly, yet when we look at many of the spaces where climate policies are developed and decisions are made, women are still underrepresented in leadership and decision-making roles. So her question was, why do you think women are still underrepresented in climate decision-making roles, even though they are often among those most impacted by climate change?
So this is a recurring theme throughout the entire book, from the prelude to like the last sentence of the book, that women are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis around the world. If you look at what happened in Baku, Azerbaijan, at one of the COP summits recently, only 8 out of the 79 leaders there were women. So that goes to show how unequal the representation is actually. So I really don't know why these women aren't being included in these policy setting dialogues. But I think, again, it's about gaslighting women, gaslighting their experiences and not taking them seriously. That is basically what it boils down to, in the most informal way that I can say.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for all of these thoughtful conversations and these perspectives and sharing insights from your new book.
Mhm.
Now, to everyone listening, if you're interested in purchasing a copy, we'll place the link in the chat, and we will also be including a follow-up email along with the recording of tonight's event with that link. Now, before we wrap up, Supriya, are there any upcoming events or projects you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh, I have a lot, so I'm going to have to keep this short just to make sure we have some time. So I'll keep this brief. The main thing I wanted to share is that this book isn't meant to stay on a shelf. It's meant to travel into workplaces, classrooms, boardrooms, and communities, and even into your own life, because the leadership pressures that we're discussing are showing up everywhere right now. So I personally, I work with organizations and institutions through guest talks, keynotes, fireside chats, panels, and workshops, etc., on resilience, authenticity, and leading through backlash around climate action and equity, for any McMaster faculty and post-secondary institutional staff here. The book is also highly usable in learning settings. So the chapters actually work as case studies and discussion prompts for sustainability, responsible management, women in leadership, and governance conversations. So I'm always happy to discuss further because I've been processing a lot of bulk orders recently for universities and organizations at, discounts. So I'm always happy to discuss further if anyone's interested. And if today resonated, then the best ways to support are simple. Get the book, share one takeaway online, and tag me and what you think about it. Any quotes that resonated, any chapters that you liked, any thoughts. And if you've read it, you can leave a review, and that really helps get the message out there and amplify it further. And also just to let you know, I'm also writing the next book, building off of this one, focused on male allyship and co-leading in an age of resistance. So any insights from anyone are welcome. You're welcome to connect with me. And please follow me on social media and join my newsletter. And for more book tour updates and sustainability commentary in an age of resistance, March is launch month because it's Women's Month. And today's webinar was one of the book launch events. So again, I'm so grateful to McMaster and DeGroot, the Alumni Association, the Faculty of Science. We graduated in 2013. And Saniyah, thank you so much for moderating it today. Stephanie, Lynn, Chris for organizing everything and putting it together. And there are so many more Women's Month events still to come. Friday, I have one session at University of Guelph, next week at the University of Alberta, and after that, I have some more panels. But the book tour continues throughout 2026, and more events are being planned right now for April and May and onwards. So, but anyways, yeah, thank you so much for having me today, and it's been such a pleasure to share my thoughts.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. You have a very busy schedule, so we really appreciate you taking the time
Thank
to inspire our next generation of
you.
leaders. And now for our book draw. Congratulations to the 10 registrants who have won a copy of Supriya's book, generously provided by the McMaster Alumni Association. Your names will be posted in the chat and you will get a follow-up later. A member of the alumni team will follow up using the email address you registered with to collect your mailing details, and you can read this incredible book Supriya has written. Now, on behalf of McMaster alumni, the Faculty of Science, and the DeGroote School of Business, thank you so much all for joining us this evening.